Tonight, we're going to kind of get into the math and some other interesting things. I have a lot to cover, so up front, I'm going to apologize if I basically just scratch the surface because I don't have as much time, but I have hopefully given you some other additional resources that I think will be helpful as you further dive into these various areas. So to get us started, tonight is going to be about analytics and optimization, specifically conversion rate optimization. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. And just as a brief kind of what I'm tying this to in previous sessions that I've done, we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting and which goals are you setting, which KPIs are you setting, and then how are you using that to close those leads and look at your results. So we're kind of looking at, what do you do at the beginning, and then also what do you do at the end to make sure that you are delivering and that you've reached the finish line and hopefully exceeded your expectations, not just met them. Again, I just want to highlight in a lot of cases, we're going to be talking about if you bring people to content, to lead magnets that you've had, how do you make sure now that you convert them and that you close the deal? So tonight is going to be really a little bit more around the closing and looking at the statistics and data around what's happening sort of in some of those interim steps. What we're going to learn today is I'm going to talk a bit about sort of common digital marketing KPIs. By no means is this exhaustive, and a lot will depend on your business. So please don't say, Rochelle said these are the ones we have to track. There might be others that I haven't mentioned tonight that are equally important. So, but I will highlight the ones that are very common and that I think are really important to your bottom line. We're going to talk about calculating return on investment and return on ad spend, which are common sort of return calculations that you will see in the marketing space. We're going to describe some attribution models. And what is attribution? It's a really big part of figuring out how you should spend your money going forward, what worked, what didn't work. And then we're going to talk about some ideas around conversion rate optimization. Again, this could be a seminar in and of itself. So I'm just going to give you sort of the Cole's notes on this, but hopefully it'll get you started. And with some of the additional links and articles that I have, you can learn more and delve into that even further. In terms of our agenda, I'm going to break this down into a couple of things. So before we get into the analytics and the calculations and the math, there are some things that you need to do to prepare to basically track your analytics. So we're going to talk about that first. What do you have to do to prepare before you even start tracking things? Then we're going to dive into KPIs, analytics, and ROI issues. Then we're going to talk about some attribution models, conversion rate optimization, action items, and next steps that you guys should take. I have several additional links and resources for you. And so there we go. What we're going to talk about is I think 3 weeks, no, the first webinar that I did, we talked about setting your goals and objectives and your targets. And so when we're talking about B2B lead generation, again, that's sort of where we started. And so we're coming full circle. What is it you want your lead or visitors to do, right? So we're bringing people to our website, to landing pages. What do you want them to do? And we talked about primary conversions being you want them to purchase something, or you want them to donate. You want some kind of exchange to happen. And usually that's what most people want, is like the optimal outcome. But then there are also secondary conversions, and that could be signing up for something where you get their contact information and you basically are able to then build a relationship by emailing them or contacting them about information along the sort of in future interactions, right? And this could be signing up for a trial, a webinar, a demo, an ebook, some downloadable content, white papers, research, signing up for your newsletter. And then there's sort of the tertiary goal, which I'm going to bring up because it comes up a lot in marketing, is sort of brand awareness and exposure. And I think that while that's really important and it does contribute to many of the primary and secondary conversions, you have to be careful around tracking, because tracking for brand awareness is a little bit hard. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly how that's impacting your bottom line, your profits, your net profitability, right? But it is something that often is a goal and objective. So I think it's important, but I also think that it has to be combined perhaps with things that are really tangible and that will help you with your business. So let's talk a little bit about specific KPIs and targets, because that's what I asked you to do in the first webinar. Today, we're going to dive into that a little bit more. So the first thing is, I always get this question from a lot of people: which analytics are most important? Rochelle, which ones should I track? And basically, the answer that I always give is basically this one: the ones that help you measure, meet, and exceed your goals and objectives, right? Those are the ones you should track. So depending on what it is you want to do as an organization, that's what you should be tracking. And anything you're tracking, you should be able to tie it to those goals and objectives. So for some people, that might be donations. If you're a nonprofit, it might be getting donors. So what is it that you need to track to make sure that you are delivering on what it is you want to do? I'm going to give you some things that I see in a lot of the for-profit world, but I just wanted to highlight that really think about what are your goals and objectives. That drives everything in any organization that you're in. Before we dive into what you should track, I do want to highlight what you should not track, because perhaps this is something that I also hear a lot about. So someone's asking, are there differences in terms of goal setting depending on which stage of the AIDA? So the sort of attention, interest, desire, action, your conversion funnel model that the lead is in. Absolutely. Although I would say that one of the things there is that obviously the goal for a lead is that you will convert them to a customer. But yes, basically, sometimes depending on where they are in your conversion funnel, the goal may be to move them from this stage to the next stage, right? And so you want to track how many people converted from stage, let's say the interest stage, to the desire stage, right? So that would be something that you would want to track. But there are other things that I'm going to highlight that I think are important. So yes, depending on where they are, but at the end of the day, you want to track things that are going to help you grow your business and be more profitable. That's really the ultimate goal. Otherwise, why are you tracking it? It's a waste of your time. Which is a really good segue to what I was saying, which KPIs not to track. These are often what we call in marketing vanity metrics. Often there are things in marketing that you can measure really easily. They're easy to measure, but can you really, do they really have an impact on your business, right? And so, really what these are metrics that do not impact your bottom line. And when I say that, you cannot, when you look at these metrics, you have a difficult time looking at that metrics and creating a story or a line as to how that metric helps you increase your revenues or decrease your costs. Because at the end of the day, it has to be sort of one side of that equation, right? So when I say increase, I'm like, well, it's brand awareness. Well, brand awareness means more people know about you. And so more people know about you, which means more people are more likely to convert to buy your product. So it does impact your revenues if people know about you. If people don't know about you, how could they purchase your services or your products? But basically, what are these metrics? Some of these are very common, like, I'll be honest with you, likes on social media is one that often comes to mind. You guys are looking at likes. So if I get 5 likes or if I get 10 likes, how does that impact my bottom line? What does that mean? I have an engaged person. Am I doing something with that engagement? What else am I doing with that person who is liking my content or is doing things? The fact that they like it in and of itself is meaningless. But how are you leveraging that to do other things? So think about that and make sure you're not wasting time on things that don't really matter. And really, at the end of the day, also metrics that you can't act on or that you can affect, that you can change behaviors. Those generally, if you can't change something, there's no reason to track it. If you don't understand how to affect it, then perhaps you shouldn't be tracking it until you understand how to do that. So this is what you should not be tracking, but let's go into what some of the things that I see a lot of people tracking. So these are all going to be general marketing, and I'm going to do this, as I said before, I am a quantitative marketer. So some of these are at that intersection of marketing and finance, but really that's because they're the ones that probably matter the most to the business that you have. So the first one that I want to do is customer acquisition costs. How much as a marketer are you spending to get a customer? And this is a really, really important metric to follow, because how much it costs is kind of an expense. It's your investment, right? It is something that often you also spend before you actually get the revenue. So you're spending this with the hopes that someone is going to convert. And customer acquisition costs also, in a really holistic sense, also includes your sales expenses. Now, often marketers may only look at the marketing expenses for the marketing sort of acquisition costs, but the customer acquisition costs as a whole really include all expenses, both from sales and marketing, to convert that first customer, right? And so that's the formula. You add those two together, you divide it by the number of new customers, and you get your customer acquisition cost. The other thing is, this is like literally the bar. This is like the ceiling. As a marketer, you don't want to spend any more money than this, because if you do, you're in the hole. If you are spending more to get customers than what you can get later on, which is my next one, the customer lifetime value. How much money are you going to make on a customer over the lifetime of them being with you? Not how much do you necessarily make with the first sale, but basically what you want to look at is the customer lifetime value. So sometimes you will have a customer acquisition cost of $200, but you know that the customer will stay with you, and over the lifetime you will make $1,000. So it's worth spending $200, even if, let's say, that first year you only get $100 out of them, or $150. So you're in the whole year one, but year two, if you keep them happy and you know that they stay for many, many years beyond that, then you're making a lot more profit. So that's really good. Brian, you're asking, what is a typical sort of a customer acquisition cost for a SaaS company? Again, I hate to say this, this is my MBA answer, it depends. A lot of it depends on the customers you're going after and the size of the services that you're providing. So there are some SaaS companies that have monthly recurring revenue or monthly subscription rates that are several $1,000s. If that's the case, you can actually have a customer acquisition cost that is much higher, because you're going to make that money back much more quickly. If your subscription rates, your monthly recurring revenue from your customers is quite low, if it is $50 that you're getting or $12 that you're getting from your customers, you want to be very careful about spending, a lot more money relative to what you're going to be bringing in. So one of the things that I really say is look at the customer lifetime value. How much money do you anticipate you will make from customers on average? Are you seeing, how long are they there? What is the average revenue per customer? And then how many customers leave on a monthly basis? That's what monthly churn rate means. Will give you your lifetime value of how much a customer is worth and what you get out of them. Now, that number, these two numbers together make up a really interesting ratio. And that is the ratio of kind of like, if you basically take lifetime value to customer acquisition costs, it'll give you a sense of, for every dollar that I put into my customer acquisition, how much am I getting out of it over the lifetime of that customer, right? Now, this is only looking at those acquisition costs. This is not looking at the costs of what it takes to deliver the product or the service or overhead or other things. So this is just, how much am I spending to get the customer versus how much do I get from them over the lifetime of the lifetime that they're with us. Now, for a lot of SaaS companies, Brian, to answer your question, you really want this to be higher than 3 is what a lot of investors are looking for as a ballpark. If I'm giving you some ballpark numbers here, higher better. But basically, if you're looking at some of this, it's sort of a 3x as it's sort of a minimum that we feel is good for a sustainable and hopefully growing SaaS company. So I don't know if that helps you or if that answers your question, but I did put that in there just to give you a better sense of it. Now, again, here we have our lifetime value, we have our customer acquisition cost, and then the ratio is there as well. And so the ratio will then sort of show you what this is. So you basically just do the division, and you can see that before it might have been really difficult to figure out which channel was the better channel. And when you start doing the ratios, it becomes very clear that retargeting advertisements are a better mechanism. Even though the lifetime value is lower, my acquisition costs, customer acquisition costs, are also proportionately much lower. So, the ratio shows me that that is perhaps where I wouldn't want to go. After that, you would see then paid Google ads, then LinkedIn, and then Facebook would be the lowest. So this just helps you get a sense of also where do you spend your money as you move forward. This is often return on sort of customer acquisition costs. I want to talk about some other return on calculations that you will often see in marketing. Return on ad spend, or ROAS, you will often hear about. And this is basically looking at how much revenue is generated by a very specific ad. And this is often when you have paid advertising, you'll see this. So if I am paying for a specific advertisement, clicks for that advertisement? How much revenue do I generate versus how much am I spending for that ad? And so this is often something that a lot of marketers will focus on to evaluate whether an ad is doing well. And it is just based on sort of the ad performance. Similarly, but in a very different way, there's also return on investment. And return on investments are the total revenues that you receive in a given period. That could be monthly, that could be weekly or whatever, minus the total expenses related to those revenues. So in essence, often we call this the net profit piece, and the net profit over in a period of time. And you can decide whether that's monthly, weekly, daily. And you divide that by those total expenses related to those revenues. Now, I put in there related to those revenues, expenses related to those revenues, because that is not just total expenses, but it is the expenses that were used to basically generate those specific revenues, those products or services. And that's really where return on investment comes in. Let me give you an example here. So a company spends $100 on Facebook ads in a month, and that generates $600 in revenue. So basically it's like, okay, but there are also other costs that are required to deliver on, the services. Let's say there's services here. So we have the cost to create the Facebook ad was $25. There's prorated salary and overhead for the marketing person to manage the ads, to get it all together, to get that ad campaign going. Let's say that's $225. And the cost of goods sold to deliver the product or service is $50. These are just all examples, right? So if we were to do that, basically your return on ad spend is $600 divided by the $100 that you use on Facebook. So it's 6x, which means from the advertising perspective, for every dollar that I put into advertising, I'm getting $6 back. That's really, and it can be represented as 6x. 6-to-1 a ratio, or 600%, or basically $6 for every dollar spent. If I do ROI with that very same thing, we get a very different answer. And so in this case, we have our $600 in revenue, but now we're subtracting our Facebook ads, we're subtracting our ad creation costs, our marketing costs for the person, and we're also subtracting our cost of goods sold, right? And now if we add all of that together, we actually come up with a result of 2 or 2x. So that's actually saying, okay, for every dollar spent on these particular Facebook ads, if we do a return on investment, we are only getting 2x or 200% back. So $2 for every dollar spent, right? Now, a lot of people ask what's the difference? And the difference is primarily that what we call sort of the ROI is what we call a macro metric, and it is looking at the impact to the organization, right? So in this case, you're looking at it from an organizational perspective, whereas the ROAS is looking very much at a micro, just at what the ad is doing. And so just be careful, because a lot of marketers will get really fixated on the ad spend, going, oh, wow, look, 6-to-1, we're awesome, right? But they're not thinking about the whole business and all the other costs that are associated with delivering that service and that product. So this is something that you want to really keep in mind when you do that. Someone's asking, how can you know how much revenue you receive from a specific media ad, for example, Facebook? I'm going to get to that a little bit, actually, probably shortly after I go through this. So I'm just going to hold off on that question, and I will come back to it. So Liz, don't make it go away just yet. I will come back to it. I will tell you how to track exactly where things are coming from. So that's part of what you have to do when you prepare your ads. There are tracking things you need to do to make sure that you can track to find out exactly where things are coming from and where leads and where people are clicking on. So I will get back to them in a second. Some other things that I wanted to highlight, obviously conversion rates that are things you want to monitor as a marketer. Visitors, how many visitors did we sort of bring to the website, to the landing page, and how many became new customers? That could be, and when I say the landing page, that could be all of those lead magnets. That could be how many people came to our newsletter and signed up, how many people came to our ebook and signed up, how many people downloaded our white paper. So conversion rate, when you bring people to a property that you owned media, something that you own, and then they convert, that's what we call a conversion rate. Something else that I really recommend all marketers keep an eye on is revenue per visitor. So when marketers bring people to your website or bring people to wherever you want them to convert, how much revenue on average are you basically making per visitor? Now, understand, not every visitor will convert. So that's why this is a really important number to have, because basically it's saying that of all, let's just say I have 1,000 people that I bring to my website this month, and a small website, and then I made $100. So you can basically take that $100 and divide it by how many, by the 1,000 visitors, and you basically come up with was it 10 cents? 10 cents. So basically you now know that for every person I bring to our website, on average, 10 cents is what we get out of them. And as a marketer, if you are doing cost per click paid advertising, this becomes your ceiling, and you do not want to spend more than that 10 cents per click, because you know that that click will bring you a visitor. And if that visitor doesn't convert, you're good. But if you spend 15 cents per click, you're spending more than you make on average for every visitor you get there. Now, you understand maybe something will be different, but revenue per visitor is a really good metric to note, because it helps you as a budgeter, but as a marketer, understand your budgets and your targets. The next thing is a monthly recurring revenue churn rate. So again, how much of your monthly recurring revenue do you on average lose every month, right? This helps you understand also from a marketer's perspective, how do you fill that gap? What is that target? How much are we losing on a regular basis? If you have growth targets, it means you have to exceed that number to make sure that you're getting at least that and then some every month. So this really helps you with your targeting and understanding what is the gap, what is the revenue gap that we need to fill in order to at least keep it even, and what is it if we are looking to grow. Customer churn rate, again, is something that I think marketers really need to understand. Some people say, well, marketers have no impact on that, right? Well, no, we don't have an impact on maybe whether they're happy with the product or whether customer support is doing their job, but it does impact the organization as a whole. So understanding how many customers are we losing, again, helps set targets. As a marketer, I'm bringing people in. If I know how many people are leaving, then I hopefully can at least manage that and balance that out so that we as an organization are doing well. So understanding, how much are we losing is just as important as going, wow, I brought in 10, but if we're losing hundreds, that's not a really good balance. So you want to keep an eye on your customer churn rate as well as a marketer to know how you can help the organization as a whole stay healthy. As I say, a healthy churn rate is around 5 to 7% annually, which translates to between 0.45% and 0.55% monthly. Those are just general figures, but obviously lower is better. But I did want to provide you with some benchmarks so you have a sense of that. And then finally, revenue renewal rate. So how well are people renewing? And again, yes, it has to do with the product and the services that are being provided, but it also helps marketers know what is that lifetime value. If people are renewing, if they're staying longer, it actually means I have more of that customer acquisition cost that I can actually use to bring in more people. So these two, while it may seem like, well, I have nothing to do with the revenue, that's, I bring them in and then I sort of hands off, that's not true. As a marketer, you need to understand that it is all connected as part of the organization, and you do your part by bringing them in. Hopefully they're happy, but if they stay longer, it also means that there are more marketing dollars to continue to grow and recruit even more customers. So keep that in mind as well. So there are many channel specific KPIs to make sure you are tying, make sure that you, every type of, well, there's Facebook and there's Instagram and there's Twitter analytics and LinkedIn analytics. And so there are many channel specific KPIs. My sort of, I can't go through all of them here. I actually have an article that links and talks about specific social media and different KPIs, but make sure that these are tied to your general marketing KPIs and ultimately your organizational KPIs. So if you're doing search engine marketing, make sure that if you're looking at just visitors, make sure you understand visitors, and are those visitors, you understand that revenue per visitor. How is SEO helping you deliver that? How is paid advertising helping you deliver on that? Is paid advertising too high that you're losing money even though you're bringing people there? All of these things at the end of the day often have to deal with that bottom line and making sure that you are profitable. So keep an eye on those. And here, when I say channel specific KPIs, what I mean are you might have search engine optimization KPIs, paid advertising KPIs, which would be like cost per click targets and things like that. Social media might be how many people convert or how many people follow your pages or engage with you. And email, you would have open rates, click-through rates, and things like that are very specific to your email funnel as well. So you'd have sort of different funnels for these particular journeys, but you want to have perhaps some targets there as well. Any questions before I move on? Any other questions? I will get to how do you track where that's coming from Facebook next. So I haven't forgotten. Okay, great. So the first thing you want to do in preparing is you want to prepare, and I talked about this, I think, in webinar number 3, landing pages. So there is this lovely acronym, and I don't even know who came up with it because I think it's crazy, but you never start a marketing campaign without a dedicated landing page. When you have a marketing campaign, the worst thing you can do is send people to your homepage. We talked about this 3 weeks ago, that attention ratio. Basically, you want them to land on a page where the one thing or the few things that they have to do are convert, click, sign up, do whatever. So you don't want them going off down different rabbit holes. You want to minimize the number of options that they have available to them. So you want to have a dedicated landing page. And I'm just going to briefly go back to what a landing page is, because everybody thinks, okay, do I have to get unbounced? No, you don't have to, but basically make sure that your landing page has that heading that is a unique selling proposition and addresses why you brought them there. So if you brought them there from a post, social media post, you brought them there from an ad, basically something that was external to your website and you brought them to your website, make sure that that heading is appropriate for their interests. Make sure that you're delivering the benefits that they will be seeking. Generally, I recommend a visual of some sort, a video, a visual, because we love visuals. So not just static stuff. And, have a call to action. Now, social proof is really important if you are trying to sell them on something or get them to download something. One of the questions I often hear is, but Rochelle, I'm just promoting a blog post. A blog post, it's just a blog post. A blog post, the actual page with a blog post is considered a landing page. So my question to you is the title of the blog post what they're expecting to read? Is the content of the blog post, does it have the benefits or the tips that they expect? And here's the other thing. Do you have a call to action on that page? The biggest thing that I often see are people have blog posts with no call to action. So if I'm reading this blog post, think about, get them to sign up for your newsletter to get more tips like this. Get them to download an ebook. Get them to go to another blog post that is related to the one they've just read. There always should be a call to action, even on something as simple as a blog post. So keep that in mind. And so you definitely want to make sure that they're doing it. So Alvaro's asked me, what if my product is an app? Should I bring my potential customers to App Store or to a dedicated landing page? So part of it, Alvaro, is if your conversion is you want people to download the app, then you should bring them to the download page in the App Store and make sure that you make it as simple as that for them to download. So minimize, you don't have to bring it to your web page. If they can't download it directly from your web page, bring them to wherever the conversion is going to happen. So the landing page should be wherever they can convert and do whatever it is you want them to do. That is my recommendation. So someone, and there was some ad spend by impression costs. What's a fair value? Again, these by impressions, so CPMs are pretty low because there's not as much value in just people seeing your ads. That's why a lot of the paid advertisement has gone to a more cost per click model. Often these are, less than pennies per 1,000 impressions because the value is seen much lower. Most people are moving to a cost per click because they want to actually connect it to an action. So cost per click or cost per action or acquisition, which are higher, you pay higher costs for those, but at least you can tie that to a real activity and people doing things versus impressions. They saw it. I don't know if that meant anything to them. So as a person, the value is much, much, much lower. Now let's see. So I work for a music nonprofit and the blog is mainly used to create entertaining stories to enhance user engagement. How can I incorporate unique selling point and benefits into that? So what I would do is basically, this is awesome. Make sure, for example, in the blog post that you have whatever's entertaining, but if you have other things that entertain them, link to those other things. And if it is a nonprofit, then, link to things. Why are people there? They're there to be entertained, but also what is it about the nonprofit that you think is of value and related to that particular piece of content? If you are just entertaining them and you're getting nothing from the viewer or the reader, why are you doing it? That's Rochelle's question. Like, you're wasting time, you're creating something to entertain someone else, but if you are getting nothing in return, that's just a waste of time and energy and money, right? So my question is, when you are creating these things, when you're creating user engagement, what do you hope to get them to do? Right? What is it you want them to do? What is it that you're hoping this will be a window into? And once you have that, then, connect them to something else on the website. If it's entertainment, give them a piece of music, give them a downloadable piece of content, give them, as we talked about in our sort of content marketing things, a file or a tool or something that might help them so that they can give you their email address. Now you have their email address. Now you can start a conversation with them going forward. So that's really important. So landing page, make sure, as I like to say, get your house in order. Before you start marketing, make sure you have a place that people can come to that will benefit them. You don't, as I mentioned, I think in the last one, you don't invite people for dinner without cleaning up your house, right? So get your house in order, make sure it's all ready for them to come. You've been doing all this wonderful stuff. Now you go out and you're going to basically start promoting it, right? Which gets me to the other question. The first thing that I wanted to highlight was unique campaign URL builders. Now, there are lots of tools that will do this and create some of these things in bulk fashion and automate this, but I wanted to give you a link to a resource that every marketer should do, and this is about preparing to track. Anytime you have a link, so that landing page has a link, has a URL, you should always, for that URL, if you are going to use that URL for a campaign on Facebook, you should basically customize it using something similar to this, a campaign builder, UTM Campaign Builder. And the idea here is that you have the core web page URL, but you can add additional variables. And these additional variables will show up in your analytics program. So later on, when you're looking at the results, you can actually see which campaign this person came from. You can see that even though they landed on the same landing page, this person came from Facebook and this person came from LinkedIn, because basically you can create a unique URL that basically lets people know, and only use it for LinkedIn and only use it for Facebook, so you know exactly where they came from. And this is really huge for attribution as well. So here is a campaign builder. I've given you this in the handout with a link. I just use this as an example. If I wanted you to go to my homepage website, which I said one should never do, but if I did, and I wanted the source to be New Ventures BC, this webinar, these are all your own terms. So this is not anything you have, that's not prescribed. You have to put it in there. You see the red star, but it is not, there's not a specific word that you have to use. And then if I said my campaign name, I'd say B2B Digital Marketing Series. That's what this webinar has been. And I just added campaign content analytics optimization because that's the name of this particular webinar from tonight, right? I could then copy that URL and post it somewhere. And if you clicked on it, I would know that you basically got that link based on tonight's webinar, right? And so even though you're landing on my webpage, it would still be the same webpage. It would still be the same thing that anyone would see otherwise, but it basically gives me information as to where you're coming from. And that's really, really, really important when we get to attribution and we're trying to figure out which channels are working best. So if nothing else, make sure you have customized URLs for all of your marketing activities, for all of your advertisements, so that you know exactly where people are coming from. And these then show up in your analytics later on, your Google Analytics, in your various programs, and you can then sort and go, okay, which campaign did better? And you can now slice and dice the data as it comes in later on. Yes, so the link is very long, so it absolutely could be shortened. So you could take this link, and there is, in this one, you can convert URL to short link if you wanted to, but you could also just create your own short links. You could create bit.ly links if you want to. So yes, you can take this and create whatever you want. But basically now you have a very specific link that has all of those variables that you want. It just forms it for you so that you can then paste it. Yes, I would definitely not necessarily want to do that. Although most people, when they click on something on Facebook, do you notice the URL that you're clicking on? No, you're clicking on a button, you're clicking on learn more. So it doesn't really matter as much. Most people, when there's a call to action, are just clicking on the call to action image or button and usually are looking less at the link itself. So depending on how it's being used or whether it's going to be shown, you may want to leave it, but if you want to shorten it, you're more than welcome to do that. If you shorten it, you can also get additional data and analytics because you can see who clicked on the shortened link. So you should have analytics for that as well. Any questions? Hopefully that answers your question about how much revenue you receive from a specific. So again, if you know that this person clicked from my Facebook ad and then they bought something, I now know that that revenue that they bought came from Facebook ad. I can now tie it because I can see that from my Google Analytics, they came from Facebook, they landed on the landing page, or they landed on the product page or the service page, they clicked buy or purchase. Now I know that that whole sort of succession of steps is tied to that Facebook ad that I posted. And I'll know exactly which one. So hopefully that answers your question. Really, really important around doing that. Couple of things. I've been mentioning Google Analytics. For those of you that aren't familiar with it or are familiar with it, Google Analytics, if you have a Gmail account, has a demo account where you can play around with it. So if you don't have it on your website, it wouldn't hurt to maybe go there and see what Google Analytics is all about. Here's a link to where you can get a link to the demo account. And Google has a demo account that is tied to the Google merchandise store where they literally sell Google merchandise. But I wanted to bring this up just because historically, up till like last October, we were all using Google Universal Analytics if you had it on your website as a tag. And it was sort of structured with sort of these 4 basic areas: audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversion. And each one of them answered the question that you see to the right. So audience is who came to our site. Acquisition is how did they get there. Behavior is what did they do, and were they successful is the conversion piece. And this is primarily, I'd say, for past several years, how most of us have been looking at our Google Analytics pieces. All of that changed or is in the process of changing. So this is what the sort of, I'm going to say the Universal Analytics, and you'll see that UA account looked like, and it's probably what most of you are familiar with. I'm not going to do a big Google Analytics demo tonight. I've given you some links to it. I've given you some links to the Google Analytics Academy, where you can learn more about how to use Google Analytics better in my additional resources. But it is a powerful tool to look at the results of your activities. And if you've used those customized URLs, you now have some gold nuggets there to find. But in October, and if you haven't updated your tag since October, you are missing out on where Google is moving towards. Google has now announced GA4, sorry, I got that wrong. Google Analytics 4. So Google Analytics 4, GA4, is the next version of Google Analytics, and they are going much more to a cohort-based model. It is a much more data-driven. They have different user interfaces on this, but it isn't. It doesn't have necessarily everything that Universal Analytics has. So what I recommend is go into your Google Analytics account, get the there's another tag, a new tag for a GA4, get the GA4 tag and also put that on your website so you have both. And you will then have both sets of analytics. All new features are going to be part of GA4. Going forward, Google, this is what Google is investing all the new features into. So the old one, UA, still works, but obviously at some point they're going to sunset that. So I recommend you start looking at the new interfaces and the new data and how it's being organized, because going forward, this is what Google has been investing in. And so it really would be good to get some of that information. Google's using a lot more AI, machine learning with the new GA4, so Google Analytics 4. So again, just something to keep in mind. If you have not updated your Google Analytics tag, go into your Google Analytics tag, your admin, basically log into Google Analytics, go down to admin, and you'll see tags, I believe, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but get the new one as well. And you can have both. If you go into the Google demo account, you will see that there are 2 different views. One is a view that says UA, And this one is a view for a GA4 flooded, which is a Google app. The benefit, I can't remember who was asking, but the benefit is that you can now track interactions across the web and applications. You can connect app interactions with web applications. So that's why for those of you who have apps, this is a much better sort of combined way of viewing things. It's connecting those users in a way that is a lot more exciting. So it's sort of cross-platform now. Does Tag Manager do the new tag for you? No, Tag Manager does not do the new tag for you. You still have to implement the new tag. You have to go to Google, get the new tag for the GA4 and put that in Tag Manager. So just like you had to sort of put your original Google Analytics tag in Tag Manager, you have to go and put the GA4 one in it as well. So great question. Okay, so then again, just want to remind everybody, because it's a really important thing, attribution. So what is attribution? So attribution, as I mentioned, is how do I figure out where my money went and which channel was the best one to put it towards? So here's an example. Let's say that you had a display ad, a banner ad. Someone did a search. Someone basically clicked on a paid search ad. Then they saw a link in social media, and you saw that they kept coming back to your website from each one of these. And then eventually they bought something for $700. Okay. And the reason you know that it's the same person is because we know from our browsers, we can see whether this is a returning visitor. And so you can see the returning visitor came from the display ad, because I have a custom URL, from the natural search, from a paid search, and from social. And then eventually they converted. So which channel do I credit for the sale, right? That's what attribution is, really. Which channel should I attribute the $700 to? Or how much of the $700 do I attribute to each channel, to each activity, right? That's really what attribution is, and that's a question we're trying to ask. So again, there are a variety of different ways of answering this question. There is, I'm going to off the top tell you there's no one answer, right answer. The first versus last touch attribution. So some people will say we want to attribute the entire $700 to that display ad because that's the first introduction someone saw to get them interested in our product. So that was like their first exposure, and that's what triggered the whole conversion funnel. So we're going to say $700 should go towards display, go against our display investment, right? Because what we're trying to do is also ROI, where we're getting the biggest ROI. But then that's saying that everything else was kind of zero. That doesn't quite feel right. Last touch is kind of 700 goes to the last thing. So social media would get all the credit, right? There's what we call it linear attribution, where we say, let's just do it linearly. So display, everybody gets basically, in this case, a quarter of all of that sale. So $175 gets attributed to each one of these channels, right? Again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a preference of looking at it. And then there's what we call sort of starter, players, and closer attribution models. And these are a lot more flexible, and I would say also can be customized, where we basically are saying the starter is that first exposure, that first thing that triggered them, that triggered interest. Closers are literally that last thing that closed the deal. And players are everything in the middle, right? So anything, whether that's 1, 2, 5 things that they saw in the middle. And what you can then decide is, how do you want to basically create your model? Do you want to give starter, let's say, 40% and then, or 30%, and then you're going to have the last one be 30%. And then the middle ones are all going to be 40, they'll split the 40%, whatever's remaining. That's sometimes called a U attribution model because the ends are a little bit higher than what's in the middle. Or do you going to give the last two 50%? So you have some options here as to how you're doing this. There's also basically, I talked about this starter, closer, and player. There's also what they call the the time decay attribution, and that really is over time. So basically we say starter is really low because it was further away, and it gets the lowest credit, and every one that happens more recently gets a slightly higher margin until the last one gets the highest percentage of credit because it's the most recent, right? So one of the questions I always get is, which one should I use, right? Which one should I use? There isn't one way to attribute for credit. what I do recommend is that you decide on an attribution model, any of the ones that you have there, because there are pros and cons to all of them. I'm sure you guys can see that. But basically use the same attribution model for all of your conversions. So decide on one and then go, okay, that's what we're going with, because some are, but just don't be like, oh, for this month, we're going to do first touch. Next month, we're going to do last touch. So just decide on a model and stick with it. That is how you can then compare and sort of compare equally. Does that mean you might be leaving money on the table? Possibly, but sometimes it's really hard to do that. So that's what I recommend. Pick something, a model that you think makes sense and that you're happy with, and then it will basically be the same for all of those channels. So if paid search is the first one time, it gets, you know, the lowest if that's what you're doing. But if it's the last one, it'll get the highest. And usually what we find is over time, it actually works itself out. Again, if you are looking for some of this within the old UA version, if you go to conversions, multi-channel funnels, model comparison tool, you will see that there's a last interaction drop down, and at Google they call it the last interaction. You can see what they have: last non-direct click, and they have all these different models here: first interaction, linear, time decay, and position based is kind of that U that I was talking about before. So you can actually look at things and go, okay, depending on the model, how do we want to look at things? And Google will then give you that interaction, that model comparison that you can do and see based on that. So pick one and then stick with it is my recommendation. Now we're going to get to conversion rate optimization and close it out, because now that you know how things are optimized, you are converting things, how do we optimize and make sure that we are doing the best we possibly can? And I'm going to go from an ad perspective. So I'm going to use the ad, but the ad could be a post, a social media post. So wherever you see ad, it could be a piece of content that you've put somewhere that is bringing people to your homepage, or not your landing page. So don't always think of this as a paid ad. This is basically you are out there promoting your content in some fashion, free or paid. And so there are 4 elements. The first element is your audience. And we talked about this in our first webinar, really understanding your target audience and making sure you know who they are. So making sure that whatever content and whatever you're selling really is what your target audience wants and needs. The other thing is obviously that ad or that content that you're creating. What are you doing to promote yourselves? So the content. Then there is that landing page where people land. And then there's conversion. So there really are only sort of 4 basic components. That one's really simple. Devil's in the details always, right? But basically what you look at is your ads appear to your targeted audience, that promotion, that post appears to your target audience, and then hopefully some portion of them click on it and it brings them to a landing page. And if they like what they see, they will then convert and you will make money. It's a very simple process when it all comes down to it. But, you know, one of the questions is, how do you optimize this, right? So again, an example, if I were spending $100 on an ad, so this is a paid ad, for example, to reach a target audience, and 1,000 people saw the ad, but 10 people clicked on it, then my click-through rate would be 1%. And my cost per click would be $10, because 10 people clicked on my ad and I spent $100. $100 divided by 10 is $10. So then those people, so basically the 10 people then go to my landing page, and from my landing page, let's say 1 person converts. So now we're doing some more calculations and we're going, okay, 1/10 of the people on the landing page convert. So my conversion rate from the landing page to conversion is 1% at that point. And then my cost per conversion in this case is $100, because I've spent $100 for my ad. And out of that $100, if we go through the whole cycle, at the very end, I ended up with 1 person. So 1 person cost me $100. Okay. So now the question is, how do I actually optimize this, right? And it's pretty simple. It's not really rocket science in any way, but there are a couple of things that you want to look at. So you want to perhaps improve and increase your click-through rate. More people who click through, that means that your content is compelling and they like it and they're interested. So you want to improve your click-through rate. You want to improve you want to decrease your cost per click. So if you can get that number lower, it means that actually you can make more money. You can have more clicks for the same budget. So reduce your cost per clicks. And then you want to increase your conversion rate. So on that landing page, back to our attention ratio, make sure that your calls to action really convert them and that there aren't too many other things distracting them as they do that. So increase that conversion rate. If you can do all of these things along the way, often small changes can have a huge impact at the very end on the conversion rate that you ultimately get. So what I want to highlight is basically make sure that if you aren't doing, that's how you do it, but make sure that your audience is very well targeted. Sometimes we are too broad, and that's why we're not getting the right people clicking on our ads, because our audience is too broad. So basically focus and make sure you have a really well targeted audience. That is how you improve it. The other thing is make sure that your ads and the words you use and unique selling propositions are also really well targeted for that audience, right? So these are little things, small things that can have a huge difference on the results that you have. And then finally, you want to look at sort of on the conversion rate, you want to make sure you have a really good landing page. Go back to our optimizing your landing page thing. Make sure you have the right keywords, the right calls to action, the right benefits. Basically, people feel compelled to convert, and that will increase your conversion rate as well, right? So again, better landing page, more targeted audience, and better messaging. So matching that landing page to the ad, as we talked about when we did our paid advertising webinar, increases your quality score, which means that your ad shown more, which means more people see it, which means hopefully the right people see it, and all of that cascades into increased conversions and a better conversion rate. Now, one of the things around doing a lot of this is you want to do testing. And so often you're going to want to do some A/B testing. So you want to maybe have one landing page and maybe try a different landing page and see how those conversion rates compare. So again, you want to sort of maybe do something like this, try different variables. Does this heading convert better than that heading? So sometimes you might just have two different landing pages and literally create two different ads or different kinds of flows and see what happens. See, is one better than the other? And based on that, you then can decide, oh, this one seems to be performing better. Let's get rid of the other one and have all of the traffic go to the one that we have. This is just an example. If the conversion rate went from 3 to 5% on a particular landing page, and you went from 100 to 167 conversions, and those conversions represented $100 per conversion, you would basically get a 2% increase in your conversion rate, and that's easy math. But you'd get actually a 67% lift, we call it. So an increase in revenue, right? Because so what you're seeing is with a 2% increase in conversions, we're getting a 67% increase in revenues. And that tells you that's a pretty good sort of thing to consider around A/B testing. Now, there's a lot that goes into A/B testing. So I've given you a couple of articles around those as well in my additional resources, so you can look at those. So basically, next steps and action items. What I want you to do is think about what it is you're measuring and make sure that what you're measuring really helps you grow your business and stay in business, and that you're not just sort of throwing things out there and that you're not measuring those vanity metrics, but things that really matter to you and help you make better decisions along the way. Optimize your landing pages. So if you haven't, go to check out workshop number 3 where we talk about that. Set up those custom campaign URLs. That is gold, because now you know where people are coming from. It's a lot of work up front, but it pays off in the end because you now have data and it's very specific data. So definitely do that. Decide on your attribution model and keep it consistent. Once you decide on it, just go with it and know that probably on average, everything will work its way out, and it will give you a better sense of which channels are working best for you, no matter which one you use. Document your conversion funnel and identify those areas that you can optimize and improve the results and outcomes that you're seeing. So look at how many people are coming to my website, how many people are going to the landing page, how many people are actually converting. And once you start doing those percentages, you will realize that from coming to our website or coming to the landing page, we're losing 70% of the people to converting. Why is that? And that's where you want to play around with it. Where are we losing people in that conversion funnel the most, right? Optimize for that. And then eventually you can start tweaking it even more, but look for the big losses first. Conduct A/B tests and tests and tests and tests. I've also given you an article for some really great A/B tests. Google Optimize is a free one that works with Google Analytics. So Google has an optimized tool that you can use for testing landing pages and web pages. But I've given you an article of those as well for things like that. So review all the additional resources, which I have here. So I have some math things, which we'll go into a few more other advertising math, marketing math metrics. Definitely about the UTM codes and how to use them. I've given you a couple of articles around the differences between the Google Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4 that I think will be really helpful for you to understand, because philosophically, Google's doing things slightly differently, which is why I recommend you do what we call dual tagging, have both tags on your website so you have access to both sets of analytics at the same time, and you can start getting used to the new ones without losing all of the things that you're used to in the older versions. Great attribution ebook from Visible around marketing attribution, some models, and a conversion rate optimization article, some recommended tools, and A/B testing as well. Also, Google Analytics Academy has several free online courses if you want to know more about how to use Google Analytics. They have a beginners, they have an advanced, and they have a power users, all free courses that you can take if you're interested in that as well. I've also given you a periodic table of Google Analytics because I can never remember what sometimes a lot of the words are. And so this is really great when it's like, okay, what's an event again? And, what are all these different things? And so this is based on the old Universal Analytics, but it's great if you're trying to figure out, where do I find, which section is this in? This is kind of a bit of a cheat sheet that I find really helpful around there as well. Now and for those of you, let me just go back to my PowerPoint. And then for those of you that I want to highlight here is if you've missed any of my previous webinars, I have a link to all of the webinars that I've done previously, the first 5. For those of you who have been here for all 6, thank you so much for sticking with me and for being here for 6 weeks. That's quite the commitment. As I said earlier, I wish I had a badge for you, but I guess it's a badge of orange if you know. And I just want to thank you guys for sticking with it, for being there with me today. And I'm just going to check the chat because there might be some questions here. Yes, presentation link is basically up in the chat. So for anyone who wants a presentation link. Someone's asking where all those resources in the email. But basically all of the resources are in my presentation, the handouts, which just went up in the chat. So if you just download the PDF there, you will have links to all of that. And I think that's everything for me tonight. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, there's one question I see that just came up. Hold on, let me check. So the ROI. So yes, I can definitely quickly do that. But before I do that, Hafsa, if you don't mind, I might do that after we just let everyone go. I'll just stop sharing for a second and maybe do that as a quick follow-up. But if there are any other questions, I think that would, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Rochelle. As per usual, we'll stay a few more minutes in case you do want to stick around and hear the answer to that question or ask your own. But, to be mindful of time, thank you everyone for sharing the last hour with us and or the last 6 weeks with us. And we hope to see you soon. So thanks again for joining us, and good night if you're out of here. Otherwise, feel free we'll stick around for a few minutes and
stick around. Yeah. And I'll go back to the ROI piece. So, okay, great. I'm glad it was informative. I'm glad it was helpful, and hopefully there are a few nuggets. I just scratched the surface, but hopefully you now can move forward and you can at least, what to Google. Let's put it that way. You know what to Google. So, Mac, you were asking about a quantitative marketer. So my background is I actually have an MBA in finance. So I come to marketing from a finance perspective. So I tend to be much more finance and data driven in terms of my marketing style. And so I sort of call myself a quantitative marketer. I love creativity, and I love, as you can see, lots of color. But at the end of the day, I like to make decisions based on data. So that's why I call myself that. That's kind of my term for myself, is a quantitative marketer. Because there are others who come at it from a creative perspective. And so that's how I differentiate how I look at marketing. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let me just share my screen for a second, and I will go back to, hold on one second. Let me just pull up the slide. I'm just gonna put the specific slide, so bear with me while I just get that ready on ROI. And for anyone who wants to. Okay, so really what it was, oh, and Angie, while someone's asking about what is Sales Accelerator?
Oh
What
yeah,
was that?
sorry, I mentioned that. I kind of forgot to mention that while you're pulling up those slides.
Yep.
So Rochelle is one of our executives in residence, along with Peter, for our Sales Accelerator. So it's basically companies in revenue who are looking to figure out how to kind of scale or systematize and grow their revenues, and focus specifically on sales. So we're just finishing up a pilot with 11 companies, and we'll be launching kind of version 2.0 pretty soon. So if you are a company in revenue that might want to work with Rochelle and Peter, who you'll see next week if you join us, details to come.
And Joshua, to your question, baby steps, where would I start? You're overwhelmed. I probably would start with some of my content marketing. I think if you start webinar number 2, if you watch webinar number 2 and start doing some of those things, that probably will give you probably in some ways a fair bit of bang for your buck and for your investment. The SEO is very technical and can take a lot of time. What I'm talking about today are just what do you measure? But some of the things that I talked about today, you would measure based on the content marketing that you have done in the past. So I might start with content marketing as a sort of a entry level part to move into things. So webinar number 2 is probably where I would start. Okay, there you go. Okay, so let me go and do the ROI. So the question I was talking about is return on investment is really looking at the total revenues. So how much money have you made versus the expenses that you've or costs that you've had related to those expenses, to those revenues. And it's for a period of time. So this could be a month, this could be a day. And what you do is you basically look at those expenses and then you divide it by how many expenses, and it gives you your return on investment. Return on advertising spend is another metric that you'll see often in marketing, and it is just the revenue generated by the ad, the cost over the cost of the ad. So here's the example I gave earlier. If your company spent $100 on Facebook ads in a single month and it generated $600 in revenue, but in addition to that, you had additional costs, sort of overhead costs, creative costs, creating the ad, maybe cost of goods sold was $50. I know for some SaaS companies, cost of goods sold is really minimal because we're delivering things on sort of online, but I just put that there just to make sure we had a variable there for those that do. Your return on ad spend would be $600 divided by the $100. So that's basically saying for every dollar you spend on the ad, you're getting $6 back in terms of revenues. And that looks really awesome. And often marketers are really excited about this. But what we really find is that ROI is much more holistic and looks at what is the impact to the entire organization, not just sort of on an ad basis. And so for that, you have to take into consideration all those other expenses. And if you do that and you add up all of the expenses of ad creation, overhead, salaries, cost of goods sold, you recognize that now your return on investment, return on that ad investment is actually only 2x, which means that for every dollar I spend as an organization, only $2 of that comes back in a sort of a profitable way, right? So one of the things that I want just to highlight is that return on investment is really what we call a macro metric, and it is looking at the impact of what you're doing on the overall organization, not just sort of how the ad is impacting revenue on its own, because there's a lot more that goes into it. So hopefully that gives you a better sense of what that is and how ROI is calculated. And I just wanted to go through that with you because I think that is important to know. So Hamza, I hope that answers your question. It's also in the handouts, so please feel free to check those out and go through that if you have any questions. Okay. Is there anything else? Okay, I'm glad that was helpful. Yes. So thank you for being there and for coming. I gave you a very simplistic example, but I think you can understand sort of some of the nuances for your own business when I talk about sort of all of those expenses. So I try to keep it simple, but I know that sometimes when you apply it to your own business, there are more complexities. But basically, I just want to make sure that people aren't going, woohoo, my return on ad spending is 10, therefore we're profitable. I've seen companies literally that have had a 10 return on advertising spend, but everything else actually sort of offsets that, and sometimes they're actually losing money. So you want to be careful around those numbers if they're driving your business. Okay. Yes.
Thanks for the
Awesome.
refresh. All right. Well, thank you,
All right.
Rochelle.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Have a good night, everyone. No, I'll see you soon. But
Okay, I'll see everyone next week as a participant. So so I will be here, and please do come next week to check out Peter's hiring your sales force. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
All right. Night, everyone. Bye.